Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk About Brand. I, of course, am your host, Christine Gritman. And it says that one of my streams is having connection issues. That's no good. Today's one of those days. I literally just got home from a prior commitment, raced up to my studio, jumped in here on Restream, said hey to Adrian for 2 seconds, and here I am. So just want to make sure that we're actually online first and foremost. So if people can kind of give me a shout in the comments real quick, that would be fantastic. Also, let me know where you are watching from. We are live, in theory, right now on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So please do tell us where you're joining us from. Also, let us know if you are here in the live stream or if you are watching the replay. All right, we're at least on Twitter. All right. Anyway, without any further ado, this is Let's Talk About Brand. I do this show every Friday where I interview an expert guest about a topic related to branding. It is always the same topic as I've discussed without a guest, just with my community on my Tuesday Chat About Brand Twitter chat. So please let me know if you joined us for this past Tuesday's Twitter chat all about branding with humor. We discussed the good things about using humor in your branding and the potential pitfalls, because humor is one of those things, of course, that not everybody does well. One of the brands that is certainly known for its humor is Aviation Gin. Part of that is because the part owner of Aviation Gin, Ryan Reynolds, is hilarious. But another huge part of that is that he has a hilarious team who completely understands the role of humor in the whole overall brand image. And that is the head of brand for Aviation Gin, Adrian Molina. He has been honored as one of Adweek's people to watch. He's also a contributor for Adweek, and he's all around hilarious. But don't let that fool you. There is a very strong marketing mind behind all that hilarity. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring Adrian on right now. Hello, Adrian. How are you?
I'm in the circle.
Today? You are.
I'm good.
You're in the spotlight, man. Good job.
What's up? Thanks for having me, Christine.
Yeah, it's like you're at a movie premiere with your buddy Ryan.
Oh man, those are always fun.
So I'd love to find out right off the bat sort of how you got into, not specifically how you got into being funny on Ryan Reynolds' behalf, but how you got into marketing to begin with that led you to this place in your career where you are now, which is a very cool position, gotta say.
Thank you. My marketing journey is quite extensive, and the fact that I was sort of making mix CDs for myself when I was a rapper at like 13. I went under the rap name Tactics. I was awful, but I felt kind of making the music, rapping, and creating the artwork was sort of my first foray into branding and marketing. And then kind of went into college when I joined a fraternity and became the social chair for a few years. And that more entailed marketing frat parties, and who knew that people would be so receptive towards Jello wrestling events and so on and so forth. Then got picked up by this sake brand called Taiku in 2010, and it was just like a very nice coalescing of frat drinking to alcohol marketing. And just kind of been working through different brands in the spirit space for about 11 years now. I'm old.
Not as old as I am, but yeah, I hear you. So when it came to fraternity marketing, which is an interesting concept, was there some element of branding in that? Like I went to a college that didn't have Greek. We had a cappella. We were like pitch perfect. So was there some element of kind of branding your frat as like, here's what we are versus the other parties you're going to, or what?
It was more branding the events themselves, finding thematics and a through line that students would want to come to those events. We had ideas like the money party where we give out fake money and people just do to their own devices, but also marketing our philanthropy events throughout the campus, so we get that goodwill from the college. So I'd say it's more of the vibe you're setting out as the frat and kind of what you're doing in the community versus branding the letters a certain way on some artwork. Obviously that translates to any print and imagery that we did.
Makes sense. Dewey, who's here from Wales, notices that you're rocking the Wrexham top. That actually Yep, that factors into a question we have later on from Dewey. And anyone who would like to is welcome to ask any questions of their own. But I'm going to jump into so you, of course, had to. I imagine there was a lot of freedom when you were marketing for your fraternity, of course. But then, I mean, was there a time where you had to kind of play it straight and you didn't get as much of a chance to influence brand voice? Or were you always hired right off the bat as someone who really had that voice that they could bring to the table?
When I was hired in 2010 for the sake brand, I think we all know how 2010 was in terms of just social media marketing. It was like, let's hire the youngest person that's of age available and they could figure it out. So I was fortunate enough to get in at that time and be allowed to experiment, obviously with Twitter, Facebook at the time, then obviously Instagram in the future, on just how consumers react to whether it's witty posts, whether it's more sales driven to the point, and yeah. So I'd say I've been fortunate enough to kind of let the the chips fall from my brain into tweets and messaging itself that then would translate to other touch points for consumers, like outdoor out of home, POS at the store, and so forth. So I'm a unique case. Got in early.
Now, you worked for that sake brand. You work for your actual employer right now is Davos Brands. It's not just specific. Aviation Gin is one of those brands. Now, how did you come to the Aviation Gin brand, and and also to what degree was it kind of put in that Adrian's a funny guy? He can kind of get this brand voice.
Just me making jokes in the office, but actually Davos brand stemmed from Taiku Sake. So in 2014, we started acquiring brands, and yeah, just we couldn't call ourselves Taiku Sake when we had a gin brand or a whiskey brand, so we settled on Davos brands, which I hated at first, still kind of hate now, but it's funny because I was the senior brand manager for the whole portfolio at one point in time, and I was obviously just dying being a one-man team. And my higher ups started hiring people, and they gave me first choice at a brand. And prior to that, we dipped our toes in the celebrity world with Taiku Sake, with CeeLo Green, Patty Stanger from Millionaire Matchmaker, and Perez Hilton, the famous blogger. So I was at a point where, like, okay, Taiku's my baby, time to let it go. We just launched a tequila brand called Astral that took up my whole summer, which had the most interesting man in the world, post Dos Equis. And I was just like, you know what? I want Aviation Gin because there is no celebrities involved in this brand.
That is, yeah, wow. So that's ironic. So
Yeah.
so you were at Aviation before Ryan Reynolds was the Aviation Gin guy.
That's very true. Yep, OG.
Wow. So then how did that work when he came on board? Like, what was the brand voice like before? Because now it feels so heavily influenced by him.
Well, the brand voice that I had for Taiku and the other brands prior to even taking over Aviation and being senior brand manager there was very playful. I always think brand social channels should be true to their brand and their product, but no one wants to get depressed reading messaging columns from a brand. So it's always, keep it lighthearted. Taiku had a little more feminine kind of vibe to it, since it was a light sake brand where we were trying to compete with wine. Astral was very straight to the point, since we had the most interesting man in the world, and kind of played off those Dos Equis ads, but translated to tequila. And I'd say I've always just generally in myself had this very sarcastic sense of humor that was kind of deadpan. People might say otherwise, but I think that kind of came out a little more when Ryan signed on to be the owner and invested. I was like, okay, we could have fun with this now, since we'll be having that halo of that tone of voice, which we've taken off ever since.
So how much of that tone of voice is he actually directly involved with? Is he involved in coming up with the humor? Do you have to run anything kind of by him? Or have we all just been laughing at your jokes this entire time?
So Ryan and his team at Maximum Effort, Ryan and George Dewey, who's the president of Maximum Effort, they do a lot of the top level sort of copywriting and obviously scripting of those wonderful spots that we produce. So it's extracting sort of what we've done there and translating it to the social messaging, which I mainly do, which I do every day. So if you're getting a tweet reply or if you see an IG caption, I'm usually having my hand on that. So proud to say.
Now, here's my question. It sounds like that you have a good amount of creative freedom because, of course, you are at that level where people kind of trust that you can do what you say you're going to do and you don't have as much oversight necessarily. But has it ever bitten you in the ass in terms of, because humor, of course, can go very wrong when landing on the wrong ears?
Yes, several times. Some jokes that fell flat. Had to take down some tweets before, and I feel that's the beauty of humor in navigating through it. I feel people do speak their own humors. So when you do have something that lands that's kind of widely received, it's always the best feeling in the world. I think just going at the core of humor, at the end of the day, I just believe humor is connecting two completely different ideas and objects together somehow. And that is the core base of all humor, which is always the approach. So a lot of times I forgot that and I'm like, oh, wait, that was too obvious or that was stupid or that might have offended somebody.
How would you sort, I know it's a nebulous thing to define, but how would you describe Aviation Gin's sense of humor versus, say, that sake brand sense of humor, or even the sake of the sense of humor of a totally different brand? Like Aviation Gin is not Steakums. So like, how would you describe Aviation's sense of humor and where you draw that line of knowing if it is on brand or not?
Totally. Great question. I'd say Aviation's very self-aware as a brand. The humor that we do put out could go a multitude of ways, whether it's your typical misdirection, whether it's your typical puns or wordplay. Some of my favorite Aviation tweets that we've gotten out were very self-aware and self-reflective, and even calling out, this is our intern posting right now, so that's why it's crappy. When in actuality, I'm just having a bad day and I couldn't get too creative. So let me blame it on the intern, or even calling out like our finance guy Gary on certain aspects. So it kind of creates that real world that takes you outside of just a packaged good. That like, okay, this is actually a company behind it, and this is their social media voice that might be a talking bottle or someone behind it as well.
Have there been any sort of clashes when it comes to the humor, either where it's, Ryan bringing something and you're like, we're not going to do that, or you bringing something to the powers that be and being like, we're going to do this, and them saying we're not going to do that, or is everyone kind of on board and trusting you to guide that humor?
There's always, some back and forths, again, maximum effort, great. Sometimes I do have to remind them some brand tasting notes because it is a gin brand. We do want to convey that we are smooth, that we taste delicious and everything. But I'd say for the most part, it's pretty collaborative and very smooth, as we're all aligned on the same goal of having people drink Aviation. And we feel humor is that emotion that ties it from the digital world to your glass.
Yeah. So what do you think are some elements that make humor effective for a brand versus some things where you see people just kind of failing in it? Because we all see brands try to be funny and fail. So what do you think are some of those defining factors that really help it land versus not?
I feel a lot of the best humor comes from a place of love. It's never mean. It's never meant to make someone feel bad. It should always come from a place of appreciation where you're noticing things, maybe that's just in general, like you're noticing something about someone that they might not even notice, or something that only they notice themselves that you're acknowledging and, having in a friendly way. So I feel it always comes from a place of love, never mean. Even though roasting is my love language, I do love roasting my friends and my loved ones. But that again comes from a place of love and appreciation. So I'd say the best humor starts at that core.
That's a really good point, because I can think of a very recent example that we saw on Twitter where a brand decided to try to be Wendy's and like try to roast people. And it's like, you got to have a relationship there first on some level.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Well, we got some questions for you on this week's Twitter chat, and I would absolutely love for anyone watching right now who has any questions to bring them forward. Dewey is live in the comments now talking about Wrexham, so I'm going to go with his first question from the other day, which is, how has the Wrexham FC sponsorship changed how the brand approaches humor, if at all?
Good question, dude. I wouldn't say at all. I love the Wrexham FC team. I feel the messaging that we do with them, it's a little more us as a fangirl. Because when they win, we're like, oh, they're like, dust it off, boys. Get back out there in the field. So I feel like it really hasn't, again, it's coming from a place of love whenever we're interacting with Wrexham FC. And I think some fun things are happening with the documentary as well that will really highlight the team, and the brand will be part of those conversations since we are a sponsor. And it's just not too much has changed. Just those fancy green and red bottles that we have overseas. That's the only main difference.
And Dewey also wants to know if you've seen the humor that Wrexham Lager has been using with the bootlegger.
Yes, Wrexham Lager is very funny as well. I got to make it out to Wales because I just feel it's everyone who's visited it, even our international sales team, are like it's a fun place. Everyone there is just very lighthearted and good humored, and that's my vibe. So I need to get out there and enjoy some Wrexham Lager. So next year, hoping to get out to the race course and enjoy some mixed in with some aviation shots.
Hopefully. All right. So Kevin Barry wants to know how, and I sort of touched on this, but this gets a little more granular. How does pitching humor work at your level? Do you just throw out any potential ideas, or do you refine the top few before presenting them? Like, how much presentation do you even have to do? Or are they just like, go be Adrian?
No, I think I think the end product you shouldn't have to explain. The joke could just be the joke. The humor could be the humor. But obviously, to get things done in a company, there is bureaucracy with budgets and approvals. So you might have to explain certain aspects. I think a good example is our Peloton ad with Monica, the Peloton girl, which came out 2 years ago.
That's so great. Were you involved in that, or is that just something where you're like, good job, guys?
I almost killed it because it was end of the year. I was like, I don't have budgets for this. I'm talking with George Dewey, the president of Maximum Effort. I don't have budgets for this. And I got the script. I kind of got it. I was like, I get it because it's in the news. And I'm just kind of go over things. And then I'm like, so who's going to play the girl, like the main girl in the middle? And I was like, are we going to get like Blake Lively to do it? I don't know. And he's like, no, we actually got Monica. I was like, why didn't you say that 24 hours ago? Because I could have got that approved so fast.
It did happen fast. It happened so amazing.
When you're in the middle of it, it felt like forever, but it did happen fast. But I'd say kind of with that example of explaining it, going up to my CEO, asking for money to get it produced, explaining the situation of Peloton, because it was in the news, but there was like context there. Then I know on Ryan and George's end, they were obviously very careful on navigating it, not to offend anybody, not to piss off Peloton. We didn't even say Peloton, and I think again in the background, explaining it to get to the point of success. But once it got out there, people immediately knew. I think those guys are very, very keen on not explaining a joke and people catching on to it.
That was the biggest risk of that spot, because to your point, they never mention Peloton. It depends entirely on context. So that was a huge risk.
Exactly.
Did you see any reaction like that? Like, I don't get it? Or did everyone who was talking about it pretty much get it?
Very, very, very few. And people were quick to explain to it and send them to the original ad. So
I love that you almost killed it. That absolutely.
Yeah. If I just knew we had the actual girl 24 hours ahead of time.
You know what? I mean, that's the risk you take with humor too, right? I mean, you have to know what's gonna land. To that end, Joshua Grothier wants to know, are there really no bad ideas?
They're bad if they offend people and if it harbors resentment towards the brand. I'd always say that there's a fine line between being passionate about something and being resentful towards something because it's not where it is. So I'd say those are the only bad ideas. that could, yeah, when the effects are highly negative, it's obviously a bad idea. But again, successful humor coming from a place of love and empathy is sort of should direct that. So there's never bad ideas. Always kind of think about who you might be offending, who you're not acknowledging in that sense, and it kind of leads itself.
Nice. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Off topic a bit, but Wholesome Media wants to know, you have a lot of tattoos. What is your favorite tattoo that you have and why?
Oh man, I would have to say I got this one. My New York City bodega thank you tattoo, because it's my gratitude tattoo, and I'm a native New Yorker, so very on brand. I got my aviation tattoos here.
Love the aviation tattoo. You also have your vaccination card tattooed on you.
Vax card right here.
That's handy. Misspelled aside. Very handy.
Yeah. Yeah. So small you don't even notice it unless you zoom in.
Nice. I don't think, has anyone ever accepted that as proof before?
Yes, actually, out in LA, because they didn't know how to navigate the New York City. Yeah, the Empire Pass. So I was just like, they're like, wow, okay.
I went to the UK recently, and they were totally down with the Empire Pass. They're like, all right, boop. Couple more questions about humor. One of them is, how can a brand who maybe didn't already, well, you've done this because aviation wasn't the Ryan brand before. So how do you take a brand that maybe didn't have a humorous voice and sort of take it there? Can it be just like, boom, we're funny now? Or do you have to sort of, dip your toe in? How do you go from dry to funny as a brand, do you think?
I definitely say dip your toe externally whenever you're putting out comms, but internally, whenever you're crafting that communication strategy of humor, I call it magnifying the mundane. Like, what is the most boring parts of your company or your brand or your product that you could almost shift and see from a different perspective? I think, Tushy does a great job of this. Tushy's literally just a bidet, but they've always been funny, audience. But they know their audience. Yeah. So I think knowing your audience, but also knowing your brand, that you're confident enough to make fun of your own self is always a good start. And I think executionally, I always compare it to stand-up comedy, that, Twitter is almost like the open mic nights. Instagram is more of those 30-minute specials. And I think like TikTok right now is becoming like, that headlining act of the content that you're going to kind of put out there. So that's executionally, but also magnifying your mundane within it.
Interesting. Are you doing different things for aviation on TikTok?
So legally, we can't touch it yet. Given the age groupings on TikTok.
That makes sense.
It's a little tricky. We are present. We do have a handle there. It's more listening and interacting than outward pushes of content. But, hopefully those mad geniuses at TikTok that are also Wrexham sponsors on the jersey sort of get their, alcohol beverage brand stuff together, that we could execute it in fun ways.
That would be helpful. I mean, TikTok is growing up. I know plenty of adults on TikTok. I mean, when TikTok first came out, I was like, I'm too old for TikTok, but I'm not.
Exactly.
It's different now. When it comes to, context matters so much there in terms of what people get. I mean, your mention of the Peloton thing is a perfect example. So how are you able to really get that perspective of knowing that you, who is swimming in digital all day, get something, versus kind of having perspective of if it's part of that larger zeitgeist or if it's just the people who you are hearing?
That's a very good question, because you really never know. I mean, obviously, your Twitter could become an echo chamber sometimes, and something that's big on marketing Twitter one day, no one's talking about in the real world. So I'd say it's more just well-balanced sort of insights and communications. I think going on Reddit, seeing what is on the popular page of Reddit for that day could kind of give you some insights. If it's prevalent on Twitter, then maybe like investigating on Reddit, maybe just go out in the world, talk to people, have a fun night at a bar, talk to a bartender that was probably starting a late shift and just at home watching stuff. So I'd say it's just more of, diversifying your communication groups and patterns and getting out there in the world, but also knowing what the digital streets are saying.
Digital streets. I like it. All right. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adrian, for being here. I was so happy to get you as a guest.
Thank you.
I do have one more question from the Twitter chat, which is that, sorry, in before Jesse Denny, the Twitter dad.
Jesse.
Yeah. He wants to know what you want to tell Joe Byron right now.
Oh, man. Take me out to dinner, baby. Hey, yo. Oh, man. I can't believe that's a meme now. It's so funny.
See, that's an example of something where I'm kind of not in on it. I just see all of marketing Twitter laughing about it, and I'm just like, okay. All right. Whoosh. Anyway.
It's real New York stuff that went viral because of like Lil Nas X. So again, just kind of like I think websites like Know Your Meme are amazing to kind of give you that context of why it's funny. But yeah, that's the rarity, and everyone's saying bing bong without permission because that's a true thing. So
awesome. Oh, sorry. One more quick question from a viewer. How do you know if humor has really worked for you from a business perspective? Like, how do you measure that sentiment?
That's a very good question. Obviously, you have the qualitative sales data whenever you do launch content or start, going hard on the communication patterns. And if it's working, that's, the qualitative being sales and your engagements and your follower counts, all those, numerical metrics. I think the qualitative is a little different in my eyes because I feel the past 3 years since Ryan invested, there's been lots of inspiration amongst just users and the user-generated content of people actually making commercials for us or trying to do funny things with a bottle, and them trying to obviously be inspired by the humor and trying to be humorous themselves. So I think that qualitative is the real big one. And if they're showcasing the products, they obviously went to the shelf to buy it, which helps sales.
Absolutely. Love that. All right. Well, Adrian, tell the good folks at home not only where they should find Aviation, but also where they should find you online.
Aviationgin.com. We have a store locator. If your bartender doesn't have it, tell them to have it. Bing bong. And me, myself, at the Adrian Molina on all social platforms, except YouTube.
Except YouTube. What's your favorite of what's your favorite of Aviation's platforms? Where do you think you're shining the best?
I love our Twitter. It's just a little more free flowing, and just the ability to see conversations that might not even be tagging the brand, like via TweetDeck, is always a nice surprise and delight when someone's like, "Oh my God, Ryan!" Like the keyword I have is like Reynolds gin, so they're only talking about one Reynolds with a gin. So those are fun to catch people off guard who might say like, "Oh, this is like the best Ryan Reynolds gin is the best tasting gin ever." I'm like, thank you. So I'd say Twitter, just for the usage of it and the surprise and delights of someone who might be tweeting in the void without the brand knowing, but you kind of know contextually which keywords the consumers might be saying.
Does he ever steal the keys to the brand Twitter?
He has not. It's a mutual. So I don't use his Twitter. He doesn't use the brand's.
So it is always you. This is good to know that if you are laughing at something that Aviation Gin did, you are laughing at Adrian Molina. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was fantastic. And I look forward to, I look forward to laughing at you on Twitter some more and getting my hands on some Aviation Gin.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, everybody.
So thank you so much for being here to everybody. Again, I do this show every single Friday at 12 noon Eastern time on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please let us know where you watched it today. And I also have my Twitter chat on Tuesdays, also 12 noon Eastern time. I like to keep it simple, called Chat About Brand. I will be honest with you, I'm not sure what next week's topic is. So stay tuned for that. I will announce it very, very soon, certainly before Tuesday's chat. And in the meantime, thanks for checking us out. Bye.